Well, good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, depending upon where you are in the world, and welcome to today's DevOps.com webinar. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, moderator for today's event, and I welcome you. We have a great webinar on tap. I'm really excited about this particular topic, but we do have a few housekeeping items we need to go over before we dive right on into it. First of all, today's event is being recorded, so if you miss any or all of the event, you will have the opportunity to access it later on. Following today's webinar, we will be sending out an email that contains a link to access the webinar on demand. And we are taking questions from the audience. So if at any time during today's presentation you have a question for either one of our speakers, please don't wait, don't hesitate. Just use your GoToWebinar control panel and submit your questions, and we will try to get to as many as we can near the end of the webinar. Also, at the end of today's webinar, we are doing a drawing for 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So please stick around. Hopefully you'll be one of our 4 lucky winners. Okay, with that, we'll go ahead and dive right on into today's webinar, which is testing leadership in the era of remote work, best practices, advice, and pitfalls to avoid. Our speakers today are Erica Chestnut, who is the Senior Quality QA Manager at Calendly, and Adam Satterfield, Senior Director of Test Engineering at Global Payments. We were actually going to do this webinar on camera, but both Erica and Adam are in the path of the hurricane that's currently hitting Georgia. So first of all, I want to give them both a big thank you for being on the webinar in light of what's going on there. And also just a quick reminder for the audience that if they lose if they lose power, if we experience any technical difficulties, we will do our best to power through. Please pardon the pun. But Erica and Adam, thank you so much for joining me today. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Okay, all right, great. So let's go ahead and dive right on into today's agenda. We're going to be talking about how teams can be effectively managed remotely. We'll also talk about some of the evolving tools and processes and what organizations can do to kind of make sure that their teams are staying connected during these days of pandemic and remote work. We'll also talk about some of the misconceptions that organizations and teams both encounter, and dealing with burnout, which is absolutely a more general topic than not specific to QA and testing teams, but definitely one worth going over. And then we'll finish up with how organizations can maintain a team culture. So as I said at the top of the hour, if you have a question for Adam and Erica at any time during this conversation, please just use your GoToWebinar control panel and submit it. And you do not have to wait for the question and answer period. So Erica, I want to kind of kick things off with you. What have you seen since the beginning of the pandemic, and everybody's been sent home, now working remotely for the foreseeable future? What's different now, and how has that kind of changed your leadership style?
I have always come from a relationship focused leadership style, and what I am pleasantly surprised, but not, I guess really not actually surprised to see, is that people are leading from a place of relationship more. More leaders are leading from that place. They're getting to know their employees more personally. They're developing true relationships, because you're in their bedrooms sometimes, right? Their kids interrupt. You see their cats walk across their desk, and it changes how you view a person. And I find personally I'm leading the whole person more. I'm asking about how they are doing and how their family's doing. I'm more connected into that portion that of them beyond just the work. And so I think leadership is becoming more compassionate and more human-centered, and you're leading the whole person.
Interesting. Adam, what about you? Have you noticed any differences in the way that you actually work with your team in these in these new remote work days?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple of things that, we're kind of seeing, and, we've got kind of a quorum of leaders that we bring together, inside of Global to, have some of these, conversations. And one of the things that's really, become a common theme is, the need to be, more compassionate and more understanding, even more so than we were, kind of during the pre-COVID times. And a lot of the reason, and I know Erica was kind of hinting on this, but, with this kind of, new world that we're in, a lot of us are just completely underwater in meetings. I mean, we've got, pretty much from the time that we wake up, especially if you've got, offshore teams, you're, probably working somewhere, starting at 6 o'clock in the morning and potentially ending, 6, 7 o'clock at night with very, very little breaks. So, one of the things that, we try to do is recognize, hey, since it is a different world, we need to be more compassionate. People are probably going to be 5 minutes late to a meeting, or, someone may have to go and, grab a cup of coffee, or, go to the bathroom, or even, try to help their kids with some of the online learning. So, really just finding a deeper level of compassion, because I think a lot of us as leaders, really want to see the best in our teams, and we really drive our teams to be, efficient and effective. And a lot of times that means, from their side, being very present in conversations and being very present in meetings. So I would say from my standpoint, in terms of like the main change is, I really try to drive the team to have a reduction of meetings, right? Let's meet less, right? To hopefully give you a little bit of a break. And where that's really shown is, we really try to put a very strong emphasis on not booking anything from 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock. A very, very strong emphasis. I know, from speaking with a few folks at other companies, they're doing something very similar, like every Friday is a meeting-free day. And that's really worked very well for us. We obviously didn't have as much flexibility to kind of take an entire day, but really trying to make sure that we don't break, that kind of lunch cycle, to be able to give the people time with their families, time to, take a quick mental break, grab some coffee, grab some lunch, pretty much uninterrupted, which is something that a lot of people used to be able to do, in the workspace. So, I think that's really the big thing. And, as Erica mentioned as well, is, I think people have become more complex, right, working from home, because now they have a lot more things they have to deal with, right, where, they have to help their kids, they've got their animals, their dogs barking. So really, I think it just kind of goes back to that, increasing your level of understanding and compassion as a leader.
And to add on,
is also a big thing.
I just wanted to add on, one of the other things that we're doing here at Calendly is we talk about like things like the 20-20 rule, right? So for every 20 minutes you're at your computer, you take a 20-second break and look 20 feet away. And we're talking about solutions to make sure that the team is able to take care of themselves. Right? So like I love what Adam said, about how they're hyper focused on making sure that there's no meetings 12 to 1, or other companies are saying it's a no meeting Friday. So I think companies and leadership are giving employees more solutions, and they're saying, we want you to take care of yourself, and they're leaning into that, saying take breaks, don't eat in front of your desk. I know in our leadership meeting we've talked for the last 2 sessions about how do we get walking breaks in to where it makes sense, because sometimes you need to be in front of the computer with your notes. How can we make that make sense so people can get out, out of their office, out of their house, just for a break, but still be able to have that engagement if they need to.
Yeah, that's a great one. The walking meetings are really important. That's something that we've tried to do. If we have a 15-20 minute scrum, we all say, okay, during this one, nobody's gonna be in front of their computer, so grab your phone and just go on a walk outside, right? During this call. So, I think that really helps. And, from a leadership standpoint, one of the things that I think we can do is encourage our executive leadership to understand that. And I know we're gonna, kind of get into some of this here in a little while, but, I think this has been an immense change for the executive leaders, who a lot of them were very used to, not or limited work from home. I think in a lot of companies, there was a push to start going away from working from home. So this has been quite the culture shock, from a lot of, leadership standpoint. So, I think from our standpoint, we can encourage our leadership. So not even encouraging our teams, but encourage our, our leadership to understand and see the value of this to help prevent burnout, which again, I know is an important topic that we're also going to kind of cover here in a minute.
All right. All right. One interesting statistic I recently heard was that like there's been like a 70% increase in dog ownership since the COVID began. So I think people are looking for ways to be able to have a good excuse to go out during the day. So, all right. So moving on, Adam, I'd be interested in hearing about some of the tools and processes that you guys are using that you've seen kind of evolve as the pandemic has been going on over the past 6 or 7 months now. And how maybe you're using existing tools differently, or what tools maybe you've adopted to be able to effectively manage your workforce in this new environment.
Yeah, absolutely. So from our standpoint, I would say that it has been a pretty impactful change. And the main driver behind the change, that I'm going to talk about here in just a second has been, since we are all working from home, these, what we used to call like drive-by, water cooler, hallway conversations are now gone, right? Now instead of being able to walk over and say, hey, Angela, hey, what is your status on this ticket, right? I don't see an update, but it's okay because we can have this conversation. Now that's really gone away, right? So one of the things that we've really seen is our tools, our ALM tools, whether you're using a Jira or a Rally, have become our source of truth, to where it is absolutely critical and imperative that your user story, your defect, your ticket has the most up-to-date information in it. Because it may be that, you're stuck in a meeting where you're screen sharing, and that hour that you're doing that is a critical time for a developer to try to get information for a defect to fix for a release that has to go out, right? Whereas before, I think things were a little bit different, right? Now it's so critical that you have to have that information in there. So from our standpoint, one of the big things we've seen is we've had to really shift and retrain the vast majority of our, IT and even business staff, right, to understand how to use these tools. Because I think before, you used to be able to get away with potentially some of the folks on your business or UAT or even customer support not understanding, particularly how to use something like a Jira or a Rally, right? They could essentially just have a conversation, a quick meeting, and then that information could be presented, by the testing team or whoever into that ticketing system. Now we can't do that. So one of the big focuses for us is, we've had to change our process that this ticketing system is our source of truth, right? When you go to meetings, when you go to stand-ups, when you wake up in the morning, right, that's what you check, right? Especially with offshore teams, absolutely important. And then one of the last things from our standpoint, right, is, hooking that into, so for instance, from our standpoint, we use Q-Test from a test case management standpoint. So from us is being able to hook in your tools like Q-Test, like potentially Jenkins, right, to feed information in on the success of the build, right, to build, useful dashboards, right? So from our side, it's, hooking these tools all together to be able to tell a very meaningful story and making sure that everyone is going to them and understanding how to use those to get that information out, because we can't have those very quick, hallway conversations.
And Erica, what about you? Have you had adopted any particular new tools or processes to manage more effectively?
Yeah, for us, it's not so much as new, but it surfaced the pain points more. One of the we have a number of our developers offshore. It was the team that started our application. We continue to partner with them, even though we've grown the engineering team here locally in US. But working with them, we would have these large meetings, and there'd be 1 or 2 attendees on Zoom, and the rest of the team is local. Their voice wasn't heard. The audio, sometimes sucked. Like it wasn't the greatest experience. And we were talking about it from a management perspective. We were like, how can we improve this? Or do we just have everybody, attend on Zoom, even though we're in the office? How do we support this connection? And so this surfaced those pain points more to say, see, this is why. This is, well, not maybe the pain point, but it just naturally solves some of those issues because we all needed to be on Zoom. But it also it did surface other areas, like, we use Jira and Q-Test, but we also, because we were an engineering-born organization, we used GitHub for comments, or for bug tracking and so forth. But Jira needed to be our single source of truth. There were too many places where things were getting dropped, and that was surfaced. We needed to get consistency. We needed to have a single location that we said, this is where we're going to put this type of information, so that we always knew where to go get it. And those are the things that we've had to get really clean and clear on during this process, and it's made us better. It's streamlined us, right? It helps us to move faster, and that consistency has improved quality, especially. So yeah, and then things like Slack. We talked in Slack before, but man, the amount of individual conversation channels, or I forget what they're called, but like not just direct messages, but group channels, some for fun and some for just like, this is a long-standing, ongoing conversation, and I need this group of people in this conversation to track this. Those get spun up and torn down on a regular basis now. So these are like it's like the new water cooler.
That's a good analogy. Slack is the new water cooler, but you also can kind of, the old adage, death by a thousand paper cuts is now kind of death by 1,000 Slack messages, right? I mean,
yeah.
isn't it easy enough to overdo it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, how have you guys been able to manage that?
I got to say that one, I don't know that we have. There are a lot. I'm literally looking at my Slack right now, and there are channels that I don't know exist. And unless somebody tags me in them, I just don't know. We do try to group things. So like when we spin up squads, we try to make sure that it's listed. We have a naming convention. If it's a fun channel, we try to have a naming convention. So if you're looking for something, if you just need a break of something and you want to see what other people are doing, you could type in fun and start there. So it's like, okay, fun in veggies and fun in green thumb, or fun in music, that type of stuff. But then there are some that are they're just out there, and unless you have, or you're looking for a particular thing, and so that can be sometimes hard. And the Slack messages they're noisy. They can definitely be noisy. So you have to figure out what your priority is. And make sure that you're subscribed to the ones that you need the updates on, and the rest of them you make a time that you can go in and do your updates, kind of like checking email.
Yeah, I agree. Adam, any other thoughts on that before we move on?
None on that. I think we're going to go into some of the connection points. I've got some things to add on the next conversation topic here.
Yeah. Okay. Well, actually, that's a really good seg then. So, Erica, I guess I'll throw it back to you. I mean, how do you guys stay connected with your other teams? Obviously, since you can't do it in person anymore, we talked a little bit about the tools, but is there anything else? Any other ways that you guys, maybe certain methodologies or something like that you do?
Yeah. I mean, Slack is the hub, but so much of it is, if I staying connected from a relationship standpoint, and especially because we've grown significantly at Calendly. We've almost doubled in size since COVID hit, and we've had to figure out how to get to know people in this virtual space. And so the company holds, we have like our R&D offsite, which is now virtual, but we had a manager dress up who was hosting it, and he dressed up as Mario, and then had a costume change to Luigi, and ended it as Princess Peach. Yes, I said that. And it's, we had a drive-in movie time that was socially distant, and we didn't have the entire company go at the same time, but it was a way to get people connected. And so the company is focused on that start with human, that relationship building element, by bringing us together from culturally, right? So with the interest of just, hey, let's connect, so that you have, if you can start with that relationship, you can start with that, that I'm connecting with you just as a person and you're cool to hang out with, you naturally remember to bring this person into a conversation. Oh, let me grab this person into the Slack conversation, or let me include them on this meeting or this quick ad hoc discussion that I'm having with this random group. Let me bring them in because they're going to have some insights, or they have interest or need to hear this information. But then we also are building things into our process and making sure that we have cross collaboration with for example, within the QA team, we're bringing information back to the team and then sharing that out within the team and having discussions and building up, the muscle of, that documentation that we need, and making sure that everybody is aware of it, because we all have to test in the same application. So sharing that information, and also getting feedback from other testers about what the new feature that's under test. So we're finding new ways to build it into process, to make sure that we're checking that box of cross collaboration.
Excellent. Adam, what about you? How are you guys trying to keep that connection there?
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we're really trying to focus on, and this kind of goes back to the tendency to have way too many meetings. And some of it is, don't be afraid to pick up the telephone and, ring someone, right? So one of the things we try to do, especially from like a leadership standpoint, instead of scheduling a 30-minute meeting for something that could be a very quick conversation, it's you hit them up on chat, say, hey, do you have 5 minutes? Hop on the phone, let's get this sorted out real quick. And I think that there's just something a little bit more about, it was just kind of funny now, we think about from a technology, circle standpoint, kind of going all the way back to the telephone being the human touch standpoint. The telephone is almost more of a human touch now, right? To where you can actually, hear someone's voice. It's a more, kind of private conversation, as opposed to kind of in a meeting, and you feel like you can almost like connect to that person a little bit better. So, that's one of the things that we try to do is, have a quick, very quick, phone call, barring that for the folks, that do have, relatively good, internet connection. I'd be curious to hear what folks think about video conferencing, with other folks. I know Eric and I may be a little diametrically opposed, maybe in some of our thoughts around that one. So hopefully we'll get some good questions around, whether people like to use video, yes or no, on that. But yeah, that's one thing that we try to do as well, is trying to make sure that, you have that regular check-in, right? So one of the big things that I try to focus on as a leader, something that I was pretty bad at pre-COVID, was, shifting around one-on-ones, right? Where it's essentially, okay, well, everyone's got this critical meeting, I'll just push the one-on-one out a day or two. Well, now you really shouldn't do that, right? You really should focus on, this is my time to connect with someone on the team. And, from a leadership standpoint, I need to respect that and understand this may be a time for them to be able to say, hey, Adam, I'm feeling some burnout, or I need some help with something. So it's that chance to really get some good quality face-to-face time. So if you don't have regular check-ins scheduled, make sure you start scheduling those, and make sure that they're very, very, you don't move those around. One of the other things that we started having peer check-ins as well, which sometimes it may just be a 5 or 10 minute check-in scheduled on the calendar, where it's, hey, for my peer, how are things going? How are you doing? And that's one of the big things that we try to start all the conversations with now. So instead of starting a conversation, immediately driving into potentially, what's going on with work, you take a moment, you say, how are you doing today? How are things going? I know, how are your kids? How are they doing in school, right? And so that's been a big change for us to be able to say, hey, we recognize that you're not just a worker bee, right? You're a human, right? And we want to drive that kind of connection in. And I really like the way that, Erica presented that, where it's, people first, or, humans first, right? Very, very important to recognize. And I think lastly on this one for me is, there used to be a bit of a culture, I think, in a lot of IT of, well, I sent an email to someone, therefore it's up to them whether they read it or not and act on it, and it's no longer my responsibility. Or I sent the email, therefore I have nothing else to do. Well, I think as Erica was saying with the 5,000 Slack messages, and for us it's Google chat messages, and 50 emails coming in every minute, right? Other meetings popping up and down. it's becoming more and more difficult to really try to prioritize what's happening. So if you've got a critical item, well, you may send an email, but also hit them up and say, hey, Bob, I sent that email over to you. Do you mind taking a look at it? It's a critical item because of X, Y, and Z. Feel free to, chat. I've got 5 minutes right now if you want to go over it, right? So really trying to kind of close that loop again, to make up for the fact that we don't have the water cooler conversations, we don't have the hallway conversations. So a lot of times it takes more onus on yourself to really make sure that you can't just assume that because you sent something to someone, they're going to go ahead and take action on it. You may have to kind of work with them because they're probably more than likely just as busy as you are on this.
Right. Well, that makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. And I do want to remind the audience real quick that if you have a question for Adam or Erica, please go ahead and use your GoToWebinar control panel and submit it. And hopefully we'll have plenty of time at the end to go through audience questions. We've had a lot of really good tips so far, so be interested also in hearing about what you guys have got going on over there. So moving along, Adam, I think it's your turn now to talk about misconceptions that I can tell you from personal experience. I used to work from home full time before the pandemic, and so I know a lot of folks had a lot of misconceptions about how I spent my day, and this pie chart is actually pretty spot on, I will say. But it's I think a lot of misconceptions have since been cleared up. But have you guys had kind of a day of reckoning, if you will, on some of these ideas that maybe you thought that working from home was all about Netflix and doing the laundry, or what have you? How is your feeling changed?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love this little image here. This is something that a coworker had sent over to me a couple months ago. And, we were talking about it, and Lanier's like, oh, you've got to send that to me. We have to get this in the deck because it's hilarious. And, and it really is true, because I think that, I don't know about you all, but I do feel that sometimes I get emails, and the title of the email should be, I'm just sending this to you to prove that I'm awake and that I'm actually at my desk at the moment. Not necessarily, this is not important for you. This is just literally to show you that I've logged into my computer today. So I think one of the big things, that I'm seeing from, this kind of preconceived, notion or misconception is, and it goes back to the leadership being flexible, is, and I'm going to go out on a limb here. I'll be interested to see what y'all think, but I think the 8 to 5 or 9 to 5 is dead, right? I think 2020 has totally killed it. Now, it may come back at some point, right? But I believe that, with, parents needing to help kids, right, get onto their Zoom calls, right? Us having to teach, kindergartners how to, raise their hand and, open their camera on Zoom and rename themselves. My daughter is more of a Zoom expert than I am now. To, some of us potentially having our own parents, right, that may be, going through issues, or, having to deal with, people coming in the house. Since we're all working from the house, right, we all see things now that we need to work on, right? Maybe we need to redo our Wi-Fi, we need to build an office, we need to kind of set some things up. So, I think the biggest thing that we've kind of seen, at least from my standpoint, is, I no longer have an expectation that someone's going to be logged on from 8 to 5 or 9 to 5. Right? I think as a leader, the number one thing you need to do is you need to sit with each one of your team members and say, hey, what do you have going on, and what do you see are kind of your core kind of hours there, right? What do you see as kind of your needed, working hours? And for some of the folks that we have, someone on my team, he wakes up at 4 o'clock in the morning, he logs off at 2 because he works, with the team in India. And that's not something that really was necessarily even acceptable, right, before March. So from my standpoint, it's, you have to have an extra level of flexibility. And some of this goes back to what we were previously talking about, as well as a leader, if you have regular check-ins, or even as someone who's not a leader, if you are concerned about whether your boss or whether your company knows whether you're working or not, set up what those boundaries need to be. Set up what are my check-ins that need to happen, so that way you know that I am working, right? So for instance, for 90% of my team, it's, are your statuses updated in Rally? And if I go and look at your burn down chart, are we on task or are we not on task? That's all I need to see. I don't need to see your name, right? I've got your phone number. If something comes up, I can give you a call. But I think it's different, whereas before a lot of leaders wanted to go by a desk and look and see, is Adam at his desk? Okay, cool. I know he's at work and I know that he's probably working, even though most likely he's on Instagram, right, talking about how much he doesn't want to be at work. Right, so things are kind of changed, right? So, it's very interesting, that we're seeing this kind of change. So, as a leader, again, kind of to reinforce this because it's super important, you need to set up what are the boundaries that your folks can work within, right? That way it doesn't create this kind of nervous situation and misunderstanding to where maybe you are the type of company where someone has to physically be at their desk from 9 to 5 and they have to be logged in, right? But maybe you're not. But how is your employee supposed to know that if you have not had those conversations? And then as someone who is on a team member, if your leader has not had those conversations, you need to approach that with them, saying, this is what I have going on. My daughter is in school from X to X. I may have to go pick her up, or I may have to do something. Just to let you know, every day I will be offline from 2 to 3, but I will make it up in the back end there. So being proactive and kind of taking that ball in your court, I think, will really help to fix a lot of problems, because I did see very early on, and some of the work from home, that those problems were there and people were getting dinged because, leaders thought they should have been online at certain times, whereas they were off, trying to help their parents with something. So, you really, really want to drive to avoid those misunderstandings. And I think that'll help this kind of work from home transition be a lot more successful.
Excellent. Erica, what about you? How have you guys, or maybe you personally had to kind of deal with certain misconceptions that you might have had before about workers being productive at home?
Yeah, I gotta say, for me, if I'm honest, this for me was a shift in an awareness of a bias that I didn't know I had towards in-office work. And I would work from home, once a week. That was kind of the thing. All right, once a week, fine, not a problem. Maybe twice a week, but yeah, sure. If you've got something going on, not a big deal. You can work from home. But I realized that I was actually worried about the team members being connected in, if they were really off grid, or if they were there to support, because I would sometimes get the request, hey, I'm looking for so and so, and I haven't heard from them on Slack, right? So, and that's past experience. But I realized that I had some bias there as we shifted to this, because I was like, well, nobody's worried about me if I'm not checking in. I know I'm doing my job, and I would say to my team members, we're all adults. I'm not trying to micromanage you. But as we made this shift, I realized that there was some, I didn't necessarily poke at them, but I was always kind of in the back of my head, like, are they checked in? Are they, are they doing things? And then there was resistance, if you will, to, hey, can I just work from home for the rest of the week? Well, why? Because your team is here and you need to do these things. So as we shifted, I was aware of that bias. And I think one of the things that really shifted was helping people figure out how to work. The ones that really were like strong, I love to be in the office. I'm always in the office. That's my thing. And I had a couple of team members that really struggled with that shift. And it wasn't about them being an ineffective team member. It was about shifting in the way they work and providing them tools to be able to do that. And so that misconception, that somebody is able to work from home or is not able to work from home. What does it mean if they're not working from home effectively? And how can we support them? Right? How can we change that narrative, and that there was something that could be changed, as opposed to they're just not a good worker? And so I think that's something for me that I'm able to take forward, whether we continue to be remote full time or not. When people are working from home, it's like, how can I make sure that you are effective working from home? But also like the expectations, Adam talked about, like, we're not, I don't need to check that you're logged in or you're in a particular space at a particular time, but instead, just did you do your work? If you did it at 3 o'clock in the morning, fantastic. If you did it at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, also fantastic. Did you get the expectation done? Are your test plans linked to your requirements? Did you complete the regression cycle? Did you log whatever information that you need to log somewhere to make sure that your team, your squad is still moving forward. Is the work done? And is it done with excellence, to the best of your ability? Great, then let's keep going, And I think that's treating people like adults. We get better at that in this environment. We have to trust that we've hired the right people and that we've hired adults that are going to do their job, do it well.
Yeah, I think
you hit. I'm sorry. I was just going to say, I think you hit on a very important word there, and that's trust.
Yeah.
Yeah, agreed. And I think one of the things I love that you said there, Erica, was talking about the bias. And that's something that I've seen, in a couple of companies is I think there really was a strong bias, right? Especially from like potentially an executive leadership standpoint of, a very strong work from home, organization. I think where we had some, potentially like, I know Red Hat for a long time, I'm not sure how they were after the IBM purchase, but, were very strong in work from home. Whereas some organizations, that I've been a part of and heard of, like they essentially wanted zero work from home. So I think one of the things, that we can do as leaders is to help our leaders overcome their bias, right? So there's certain things that I think we could do, for instance, is, by showing them things like, burn down reports or sprint reports or, things that, show the amount of work being done. I think it will help them overcome their bias, because one of the things that I've seen and even heard some comments from other companies is, I think my people are just slacking off, right? I'm concerned that our employees now just think that they are going to just watch Netflix all day long. And one of the big responses we have is, okay, are you using factual data points on this, or is this just your instinct or your bias talking? Right. And so I think one of the big things we can do as leaders, or even as team members, is if we're feeling or hearing that bias, use data to your advantage on this, right? Use the points, because one of the things that I've seen personally on my team is our productivity has actually gone up, right? We're actually delivering, more, software to production than we were pre-COVID. And I know some of this is going to kind of be brought up here when we get to this next slide talking about burnout. But that's a big thing that I found, with this kind of work from home bias, is if you can use the data to your advantage, you can really help kind of overcome that uncomfortableness, right, that I think a lot of executives are feeling when they really can't see what their employees are necessarily doing, on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, let's go ahead and forge ahead then, talking more about burnout, because it's a huge problem that is a widespread problem these days. So I think I've lost count. Is maybe Erica? You're going to be Erica. You're going to talk. Tell us how you guys are dealing with burnout and ensuring that your employees are doing what they need to do to stay mentally healthy as well as physically.
We're talking about it more. That whole start with human is it's the whole. It should be now start with the whole human. And we are addressing it head on. We are auditing our PTO and saying, hey, who is not taking time off? Especially now, because people are like, I don't have anywhere to go, so why would I take time off?
Right.
And they're just keep working. And another thing for me is that personally, I was actually dealing with burnout. I was so busy helping others, I didn't realize it, and it hit me physically. It hit me physically very hard a few weeks ago, to the point that I wound up at the doctor's office because I was like, what's happening? And it boiled down to stress and overwhelm. And I realized I didn't do the very first thing that they tell you if a plane is going down: put your mask on first. And so much of it is modeling the healthy behavior. Take the break. Tell people, I now tell my team, I'm taking a book break. I have a cozy chair in my office, and I will take a 5-minute book break. I will take a 10-minute book break. I'm just going to pick up a book that I'm reading. And it could be about stuff, I'm learning something new, but I'm taking that break away from my computer, and I'm trying to get better about getting out. I still haven't gotten better about that, like taking that time to take that walk, but we're talking about it and we're trying to figure out solutions that we can give the team to where it's feasible, because it doesn't always feel feasible. It's like, yeah, take that break or go for a walk. And it's like, well, I've got a wall of meetings in front of me, especially managers. And we're talking internally, you know, for the managers, like how do we avoid burnout when all of our work has to be done at the end of the day because we spent our entire day in the meetings, you know, talking to everybody. We still have deliverables. How do we manage that? And we're, you know, we don't have all the solutions right now, but we're trying to figure it out. So it's about addressing it head on and knowing and being open and transparent that there is a problem and that we want to solve it. And so we're asking the team for feedback and what they need, but then we're also giving them time. We're saying, hey, look, you know what, you guys have been pressing, take some time off. Or as managers, we're saying, like I said, you know, make sure that you are taking time off, because I've seen that you haven't taken any time off in the last 2 months. Take a break, you know.
Right, right. What, Adam, is your organization, have you guys had to deal with a lot of employee burnout, and how are you guys handling that?
Yeah, definitely. And this one is one of the ones that certainly, you know, kind of hits, you know, close to home, similar to what, you know, Erica was talking about, you know, is since you don't take your laptop home anymore, it is always just there. And I think for a lot of us, you know, we've got our phones, you know, wired into, you know, our corporate email with notifications going off pretty much at all hours of the day, especially, you know, with worldwide teams. You know, I found myself at dinner one time checking, you know, some emails and stuff. My daughter's like, hey, you're not present. Like you're still working and it's 7:30 at night and we're eating dinner. I was like, you know what? Like, you're right. You're absolutely right. So I think one of the things that did for me is, like, you have to have a measure of self-awareness to say, you know, before this, there was a break, right? When I came home, there may have been a couple of things I had to do, right? But it was a clear delineation between the workplace and the home place. And now that is very much blurred. So one of the things that we try to typically do is we say, you know, hey, you know, number one, put your working hours on your calendar, right? Most calendars accept that, right? That shows what hours are you actually working. If you're outside of those hours, right, have an expectation and understanding with your team, a conversation of, if it's an emergency, systems are down, deployments aren't happening, feel free to call me, because after 7 o'clock, I'm turning my notifications off. It's the same thing for vacation. And that's the one big thing that, you know, I've had to do as a leader is, you know, I think a lot of our folks, you know, they're on, I know if, for instance, you know, one of my guys went on vacation, you know, I sent out a group chat and he was one of the first ones to respond. And I hit him up on the phone. I was like, look, like, you're on vacation. Like, I don't want to see any responses come from you. I just don't. I want you to realize that this is a time where you can go to, you know, take a break. And one of the things we actually did is we sent out a little help article on Androids and iPhones on how to turn off Gmail notifications. So that way, when you're on vacation, you don't get the temptation. The phone doesn't buzz and you're not like, oh, I'll just check it real quick. I'll just look at it. And you wind up being sucked in for 30 minutes or an hour, right? Not being able to decompress. So that's one of the biggest things for us, right? Is just kind of like, you know, having that conversation. And then I think from a leadership standpoint, realizing and recognizing that burnout is not a dirty word. I think before COVID, it wasn't acceptable to be burnt out. I think that when you hear someone say, oh gosh, I'm so burnt out from work, you're like, man, you're weak. How are you burnt out from work? You should be thankful you have a job, right? And now it's different. Right? You know, now it's you know, hey, we understand because not only are people trying to deal with, you know, work, but there's, you know, 30 other things going on in the world, right, that are impacting people's lives, potentially impacting their health. So, you know, I think it just, you know, really the kind of two things. One is, you know, again, have that conversation with your team, help them understand that when you take time off, that time is off. And then second is, again, I think this probably goes back to one of the things that Erica was saying as well, is recognize potentially some internal biases that you may have that where you thought maybe, hey, I'm a type A, I don't get burnout. Type A's never get burnout, of like, okay, burnout's not bad. I'm probably burnt out if I was a little bit more self-aware. And, I need to recognize that other people have so much more going on than work, and to say, you know what, you need a day off. Right? You've been working 80 hours, so here, just take a day off, right? Don't come in on Friday. I've got your work covered, no problem. Decompress, don't even sign in. So I think those are two of the biggest things that we've kind of done, to really kind of help prevent some of this, because, as the slide says, I do believe that it is, eventually inevitable for most people.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't want to push things forward, but I mean, we are time check. We're quarter to the top of the hour, so I want to go ahead and move ahead because I want to make sure that we're covering all the topics here. So, Adam, apart from Chris Farley memes, what are some of the creative ways that you guys are doing to kind of keep your team culture alive during COVID?
Absolutely. And this picture right here is what I normally look like on Zoom calls, which is why I turn my camera on.
That man in little coat, right?
Yeah. So yeah, real quick for mine is two main things, right? One I've kind of already talked about is, ask someone how they're doing. Right. That's very, very important. So don't just immediately go into a call and say, all right, here's the 17 topics we're going to go over, and we're going to blast you with those. It's no, take a moment. Hey, Ed, Angela, how are y'all doing today? How was your weekend? Right? How are things going? Because that 30-second or minute-long conversation will allow someone to say, hey, this other person on the phone is actually a human, right? It's not just, this like type A program manager who's going to drive me, right? They're actually caring about, what's going on. And then second, for my team and myself is, allowing continuing education. So because of COVID, a lot of like the really awesome conferences that people went to, a lot of the capabilities and time that people had to do, conferences, continuing education and stuff, it really kind of went by the wayside. So really making that top, right, to say, we are an organization that is not just going to take time away from you, right, to ask you to do work, but we're also going to give back. We're going to give you some time. We're going to give you, whatever the funds, whatever it might take to allow you to grow still as a person. So really kind of touching on those two human aspects are like the biggest areas for me.
And what about you, Erica? How is your organization, working on helping maintain that culture in more creative ways than, just the daily check-in, so to speak?
Yeah, I touched on it a little bit earlier about the which I realize in hindsight, the offsites, right, where we do virtual games. What is it? What's the one? Icebreaker, but then also pop games. No, I can't remember the name, but where we go out into these breakout sessions and do Pictionary, or one is I think something about using a bomb or something. It's really weird. I know that's horrible, but it's we try to get together just to hang out. My team specifically, we call ourselves the koala tea, like koala and tea, but quality. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
So we have a koala tea lunch where we're coming and just hang out. Not everybody can always join, but there's always somebody there that's like, hey, I really could use this lunch. Is somebody coming to hang out? And so sometimes it's all of us, and sometimes it's maybe 3 or 4 of us that will join that once a week lunch just to check in and just chit chat. But then the company also is organizing different things, just to keep us connected. We always have done kind of fun stuff around the holidays and so forth. So I'm really looking forward to some of the activities that they're going to service, and they like to keep them a secret, but they'll send stuff out, right? They'll send stuff out, and then it'll start to trickle through. Somebody got a FedEx package, but they won't tell anybody else what it is because it's coming to you next, or something fun like that. I sent out mugs that had the little quality logo for my team out to them, just as a, hey, we're here, we're in this together. And we showed up to a meeting, we all had our quality mugs, and just things that brighten each other's days, and stuff that's not conversations and interactions that are not solely work focused. That's that
Right.
relationship building, and we really talk through that, and ways to, any opportunity to play virtually, right? That's, I think the big one is, hey, do we have an opportunity, big or small, within the organization to play?
Well, playing is always an important element of work, right? So if you can't make work fun, then what's the point? So, all right, so let's go ahead and since we have about 10 minutes, that's awesome. We timed that actually perfectly, guys. I'm very excited about that. We have 10 minutes or so for questions, actually a little less than 10 minutes, but we've gotten a lot of great questions in so far, but there is time for questions. And I want to go ahead and dive right on into them so that we can get to as many as possible. Here's the first one. How has your new QA hire onboarding process changed in regards to making them comfortable and training?
Oh, can I start with this one?
Yeah.
Okay. I am so in love with our onboarding process. We were overhauling it before COVID. We do a Trello board. So Calendly specifically has a product ed a training that new hires go through the very first week. And previously it was like the first half of the day, and then the second half of the day they went in with their team, and did some work in learning with the team. And we found that it's a bit of a drinking from a fire hose. And so we split it out, and now they go through product ed for the first week, and that's it. And then they come into their teams. But we have an onboarding Trello board that gives them the first week of kind of like, here are things that you can do. Here's a training that you can take. Here's some material we'd like you to look at. Here's accounts you should set up. Like everything, just walking them through so they can do it at their own pace. But recently we added in little Toonly videos, so it's like, here's an introduction, and it's like, hey, welcome to the team. We're so glad you're here. So multiple people have recorded, done the voiceovers for these little videos to really help just bring a personal touch to it, right? Because we're not sitting right next to them, but we want to share all this information with them, but we want them to know that they're here. And so we're giving them gentle reminders like, hey, check into the channel. We're here for you. And, we're sending them messages during the week. Each person has something that they're like, okay, you should be about this place, some space on your onboarding board. So I'm going to check in with you and find out how you're doing and stuff like that. So I'm really excited about the changes that we've made to onboarding. We've empowered the new hires to go as quickly or as slowly as they want. And we've given them the information and where to go get information. It's also shored up our documentation as well because of that.
Very cool. Very cool. How about you, Adam? How's your organization dealing with onboarding?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing for us is to, kind of do things a little bit ahead of schedule. For instance, one of the interesting things that happened with COVID is laptop shortages, for quite a while, especially for, laptops that, are kind of used for the corporate environment, Dells, things like that. So for us, it's, as soon as we think that someone's going to be joining, we have to go ahead and, get that PO in, which involves kind of, revamping some of our onboarding, because a lot of times we would have to wait for an account to be created and then a laptop to be ordered. So we had to really kind of, shift some things around. So it took some kind of like creative thinking to, change our overall process to adapt to this kind of, new market conditions.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Here's another question for you guys. How are you handling cross-cultural and cross-country conversations? And have these conversations changed or become more difficult during the pandemic?
Yeah, so I mean, I think from our side, if we talk about, potentially cross, country or even multi-country, Yeah, it was certainly very difficult. As I think a lot of us know, right? India went on lockdown as well. So, from that standpoint, we really had to, kind of work with the teams to say, hey, not only are, we from our side, going through a lot of this difficulty, but, a lot of the folks over there are as well, and to be, very, very compassionate, right, in terms of, the capabilities that, some folks may have having to go home, potentially, travel, many of hours, right, to go home and get things set up and, not potentially have laptops. So for us, there was quite a kind of a little bit of a delay. And then I think, otherwise, it's, just I've really honestly been incredibly impressed, right, from the teams all across the entire world of, being very flexible and, and the times that, they're willing to work and hop on and answer questions and work with everyone. So, I would just say kind of overall, honestly, I was like really just blown away, right, at the lengths that folks went to make sure that they were kind of like online and working and ready. So, it's been, I think, minimal impact, but overall, majorly impressed, right, with a lot of these, teams and organizations who really, 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 took it, really to kind of like the 10th degree to make sure that no businesses, there were no major impacts.
Okay. What about you guys, Erica? How have you guys been dealing with cross-country, cross-cultural communication during COVID?
Honestly, it hasn't changed much for us. We have a single, offshore partner, and so we were working. We had a good cadence of, or a good cadence of how and when we engaged with them, and we know that certain people are available ahead of our core hours, and some are available later in our core hours because they start later in the day. So not much has changed. It's made it easier because everybody is virtual. So, joining these calls and stuff like that, there's less of the I can't hear you, or no, so and so had a question that's on the call, but everybody else is not on the call, but and so they're they forget that person's there. We definitely don't have the situation where everybody has left the room and didn't say bye to the person that was on the Zoom call, or hang up on the Zoom call. That's the thing.
Yeah, that's all right, great. So we are about 3 minutes to the top of the hour. So unfortunately, that's all the time that we have for questions. But if we didn't get to your questions, I apologize. But please note that our speakers are going to be getting a copy of all of the questions that came in. I'm sure they'll be more than happy to follow up with you guys offline to get your question answered. Do want to remind the audience real quick that today's event has been recorded. So if you missed any or all of the event, or if you just want to watch it again, you'll have the opportunity to do so. Following today's webinar, we will be sending out an email that contains a link to access the webinar on demand. The webinar is also going to be living on the devops.com website, so you can always go look for it there. Just go to devops.com/webinars, look in the on-demand section, and it should be right there waiting for you. Okay, I did mention at the top of the hour we would be doing a drawing for 4 $25 Amazon gift cards, so let's go ahead and do that real quick. Our first winner today is Bill K. Congratulations, Bill. Our second winner today is, let's see, Carolyn M. Congratulations, Carolyn. Third winner today is Diane D. Congratulations, Diane. And our fourth and final winner today is Rick B. Congratulations, Rick. We'll be following up with all 4 of you offline to get your Amazon gift card to you via email. So please check your inbox. If you don't see anything in your inbox, please check your spam folder. Erica and Adam, thank you so much for a great conversation. I honestly believe that this could easily have been a 2-hour webinar with so many topics to cover and just so much discussion about it. It's fascinating to me to hear how different organizations are dealing with life during COVID, and it's kind of nice to know that we're I think collectively we're doing a lot of things right here. So thank you again for your time and your expertise. Much valued and much appreciated.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. This was a ton of fun. I really enjoyed speaking alongside Adam and all his great experience and feedbacks. This is great. Thank you.
Awesome. Feel the same way. It was wonderful.
Great. And I'm really, really glad that you did not lose power during today's webinar and you were able to participate fully. So, you know, best of luck to you both, especially during this hurricane. And also want to thank the audience today for joining me. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I am signing off. Have a great day, everybody, and please stay safe.